Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GLOBIS Stories podcast. I am your host, W. Tanner Kirk. Today, I am joined by current GLOBIS student, Ahmed Abdi. Ahmed, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure. So, how long have you lived in Japan, Ahmed?
Honestly, just since last year, August. So it's, I think, just almost a 6 months period. So it's been 6 months so far of being in GLOBIS.
So obviously, GLOBIS is based in Tokyo, Japan. It's a Japanese MBA program. And I'd imagine for most of our listeners or viewers across the world, there's some level of interest in Japan, Japanese culture, or living in Japan. So what originally drew you to coming to Japan?
I think maybe, I'll go a bit back. So when I was obviously living in Canada, I'm originally from Toronto, Ontario. I grew up in that part of Canada. There was an influence of Japanese culture, kind of history through media. So that's how I got exposed, as a lot of other, even my local friends there.
Sure.
So I kind of grew up, watching, animation, manga, video games. So that kind of drew me in that initial interest. But it started to expand, as I got older, as I went to university, college, then the interest kind of shifted to actually learning the language.
Right. Was there like a particular anime that you remember from when you were a little kid that really captured your imagination?
It was probably Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
Very, as a lot of people that, as a kid, I was fixated to it. So
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, where's this from? And then people said, oh, it's from Japan. I'm like, where's Japan? I don't even know a country like that existed. So
I had a really similar experience. Was it Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z that you saw first?
Dragon Ball Z, because I think it was part of the North American, like the USA. So they kind of dubbed it that.
Yeah. Did you have Toonami in Canada?
Yes, they did, actually. Yep.
Yeah, I loved Toonami growing up as a kid. And I remember as well, I got really into Dragon Ball Z when I was a little kid, but I didn't know about Japan at all. I never heard that Japan existed. And of course, like American cartoons or other Western cartoons, it's like SpongeBob, right?
Yes.
Or like Fairly Odd Parents. So it's all comedy based, like 20 minutes long, and it doesn't have an overarching storyline. So the more like mature, I mean, looking back on it now, I guess calling Dragon Ball Z like deep and mature is a little silly, but when you're like a 7-year-old kid, it feels very mature and adult. And then the concept of a cartoon having this overarching storyline really blew me away as a kid. It felt so dramatic and intense. So I remember wanting to know like why this cartoon was so much cooler than SpongeBob. You know what I mean? Did you too, when I was a kid, very early days, they used to call it Japanimation in America before they used the term anime. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, I have not heard of that.
Did you have Blockbuster in Canada?
Yes, we did, actually, very famously too.
Yeah. I remember like Blockbuster had a section and the sign said Japanimation. Like I vividly remember that in my head when I was a little kid. I guess they felt like we wouldn't understand the term anime.
Maybe. I think maybe they localized it.
Yeah, exactly.
As I'm learning from my MBA courses, when a company enters a local market, they have to localize to the local country, culture. So it makes sense now that I know what I know now.
Right. Yeah, and then so, of course, like PlayStation and stuff, I guess, like what games were you into?
Very famously, all the kind of horror-related stuff, and Resident Evil, for example. Yeah. So pretty much everything that came from Japan, I was like interested just because it was fun to play at that time.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I wasn't even fixated on Japan yet at that time. It was just more of a general interest for video games, media, because at that time Japan was releasing a lot of media to the world. So that's why a lot of us got exposed, and we kind of generally built that curiosity. And then eventually it led to like, okay, maybe there's something here I should look at.
Totally. Yeah. I want to follow that up and talk about more professional businessy things, but I also love Resident Evil. What's your favorite Resident Evil?
Number 2, just because.
That was the right answer.
No, it's because this is the first one I actually ever played.
Yeah, same.
It's just, I remember at that time, my older brother kind of rented it from Blockbuster. And then I was playing it with him, and then I'm like, what is this about? Like, it was just so fascinating. Because, when you're like a kid, you're like, what's all these video games about? Why is it like? And I guess at that time, we used to assume the graphics were so amazing because it was at that time, 1990. So you're like, wow, this is like, highly, detailed, pixelated.
Yep.
But obviously the current time now, it's, when we look back, we're like, what happened?
Yeah. Did you play it on PlayStation 1?
Was it? Yeah, it's PlayStation 1, yes.
They have an N64 version as well, but I feel like that's like a more deep cut. But yeah, I remember when I was a kid as well, it blew my mind that you could play through as Leon and then you could play through as Claire. And it's like the same story, but from a different angle. And then again, like as a little kid, I just thought that was so cool. It felt so deep. And, okay, but anyway, so as a kid, Dragon Ball Z, other anime, video games, Resident Evil, and then obviously as you got older, as you said, the interest started shifting. I guess, did you kind of fall out of love with anime or games, or is that something that you're still into, or?
I'm still into, but not as much as I used to.
Sure.
Because I think the interest changed over time. So for example, it was video games, manga, but then now it's more, culture, clothing, like, Japanese, how can I say, like, there's a word I'm looking for, like, actually trying like traditional stuff.
Yeah.
I was very curious at that time, even at that time, but then I kind of jumped into, okay, if I want to be able to try all these things, I should maybe apply myself and try to learn at that time when I was in like university.
Okay, so it was around university time where you started to make that shift towards actually considering what it would take to come to Japan or experience it for yourself.
Yes, I was had like I didn't know what the plan would be, but then I had that mindset, okay, I kind of want to go there, but right now I should focus on just learning, trying to gain some kind of proficiency. So I signed up for courses in my local university.
Okay.
They had them at nighttime, so I would join some friends, we would all go. Okay. We kind of did it as a challenge, but then we realized, oh, what are we getting ourselves into?
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I mean, Japanese is a really difficult language to learn. What was your undergrad degree?
It was a chemical engineering technology. It's so it's so different from what from Japanese. Japanese was more of I think like a real interest. Like it was more like, okay, this is something I want to get, as opposed to maybe just something for like a decent salary, for example. It's like more of like an underlying passion, I would say.
Sure. So was chemical engineering something that you were like truly interested in, or was it more you felt like it was a solid career?
I think I did it for a challenge, and I did think the prospects, like where I was locally, did have a good chance.
Sure.
So even let's say you didn't do engineering technology or chemical engineering technology, you would still be able to branch into other things because it was so much layover. So.
Okay. And so we were talking about this earlier, but you have the JLPT N1 level.
Yes.
So for anyone that's listening or watching that doesn't know, the JLPT stands for the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, and it's kind of like the gold standard of assessment for your level of Japanese, especially if you want to live and work in Japan. Everyone talks about it. I guess if anyone is interested in studying Japanese, they've surely heard of it. But N1 is the highest level you can get. So that's a very impressive accomplishment. I mean, you're being quite humble about it, but first off, congratulations.
Thank you.
I know a lot of Japanese people. I've spoken with Japanese people who've told me they don't feel like they could pass the N1 because like a lot of the vocabulary and kanji and things like that gets very deep. So I'm just curious, like, how did you get that level? Like, how did you said you kind of took it as a challenge. So you definitely beat the challenge.
I think in my initial mindset, I wasn't even aiming for it. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, so me and my friends, we were all learning. We spent time with flashcards, going to university language exchanges. So it was more for a lot of us, and then me in particular, just to become proficient as much as possible. So for me, my lens was, okay, try to learn, do flashcards, studying every day, learn the grammar, immerse yourself. So I wasn't even focusing on JLPT. It was more one of my friends who was definitely, I saw way more proficient than me. He was saying, if you want to eventually live and work in Japan, you should have that. You should aim to go up if you can. Like, let's say start N3, N2, N1. If you want to just challenge N1, you can do that. But So once he told me about that, then I'm like, okay, I should actually maybe proactively shift my studies to that.
Right.
But then when I was doing the practice examinations, I realized I didn't know a lot more than I actually did, assumed originally. But it was more, I was so focused and kind of like conscientious of like, okay, I should study Japanese. And then once the N1, examination came about, there was a bit of a prep time I did. So like maybe like 3 or 4 months. So I did like reviews, cram, flashcards, prep assignments. I would buy even books. I think mostly my spin on it is I focused more on the proficiency than the test.
Right.
So then when I had to study for the test, it wasn't as a big gap to close. The gap was maybe like this. I just had to study, a lot to get it closer,
Right.
and then so I can pass the examination.
So did you just go straight to N1?
No, I studied N2 and then N1.
Interesting. So you got N2 and then went for N1. Okay.
It wasn't like a big jump, but
Sure.
when I did take the examination, I felt it was more of like a literacy examination where like they're testing your proficiency and understanding Japanese kanji, grammar, reading, listening. But I was actually very fortunate when I was spending time doing the university, like exchanges, I would focus on speaking.
Yeah.
So then I ended up having like a good balance of skills
Yeah.
due to that fact.
That's a good point. It seems like a common pitfall that a lot of people run into when they focus on studying for the test itself is that kind of strangely, I guess I would say, there's no speech component to the JLPT, right? So you could get theoretically N1, but still really struggle to speak. Or you could be really proficient in speaking and struggle with the other elements of the test. As someone, I have a lot of testing anxiety, so I struggle with taking the Japanese certification test myself. But even just hearing you talk about how you focused, you didn't really focus on like, at first at least, okay, I'm gonna pass this test. It was just, I'm gonna get proficient at Japanese.
Yes.
And then the test came after. I think that's a really valuable piece of advice. Because we get so focused on the test component or like passing or failing, but that's definitely not like what the real world is like using Japanese day to day. It has nothing to do with passing or failing. It just has to do with being able to communicate.
Yes, exactly. Like, because I noticed even when in Canada, there's a big Japanese community there. I would, go out of my way to make friends, and then they were commenting that like you're actually really fluent, even though you may not think you are. But then I realized it's because I wasn't necessarily focusing on examinations. I was like, I want to just get better.
Right.
Kind of slowly, kind of accumulative over time.
Right.
So I wasn't just thinking about, okay, let me try to strive for N1 or maybe even some other Japanese examinations. I was like, okay, I just want to focus on improve. And then eventually I can just make that leap without, it's not like you're climbing Mount Everest. It's just
Right.
maybe climbing a smaller mountain.
Yeah.
That's how my kind of logic I'm thinking about. Like, that's how I think like.
Yeah. I think it also too, it sounds like at least it helps you enjoy the process more.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's really important too, especially these days. I feel like on social media, there's so much content about like being on a grind or being like super disciplined and being like a goal setter and like crushing your goals, or we're all in our winter arc right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. And even I get sucked into that sometimes, to be honest, like feeling like I want to improve myself.
Yeah.
But those tactics, I think, can actually be more of a deterrent than something that's proactive to your success, I feel.
Yeah, for me, I felt like I was initially in that mindset where like go, do, set like, you do 100 cards per day, you try to learn so much.
Yeah.
But I realized it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It will lead to burnout eventually. So you have to have a balance of maybe accomplishing a certain amount, but then also do what you enjoy. Like, let's say if you have a certain animation you like, or drama you like, or music, if you are more like interested in those, focus on that, because in the long run, you're able to keep doing that daily, and then eventually after 1 year, you'll be like, whoa, I accomplished so much without even me trying, because it was more on an interest and a passion as opposed to, grind kind of thing.
Speaking of interest and passion, I'm curious. So you got your undergrad in chemical engineering.
Yes.
And then you were studying Japanese as a passion or a hobby. And then so after you graduated your undergrad, did you work in Canada for a while? Like,
Yes.
I'm curious about the transition from your job post undergrad and then transitioning into coming to Japan.
Yes. So what ended up happening, so when I was in university, I was also working like part-time jobs, obviously to supplement income, pay loan off.
Smart move.
Of course. You have to be proactive. But I think initially it was a bit hard to get a full-time job because in Canada, like in a lot of other countries, you have to get a lot of work experience under your belt. Classic. So I took a lot of part-time jobs just to build up my resume until eventually I got a full-time job. But the full-time job was more related to actually like property management, like real estate, corporate property management. So since they saw my resume, they were like, okay, this guy can be more on the technical side.
Right.
So we can kind of fit him in there.
Okay.
So I did that pretty much for, I would say, 7 years.
Okay.
But the good thing about that is that, since I was still new on my career and I was still green, it kind of taught me new skill sets.
Sure.
For example, how to deal with stakeholders, management, also co-workers who were like, various age groups, cultural differences, because Canada's very diverse. So I think that experience also helped grow me as a person. But then on my personal side, I would still be studying Japanese, going to community events.
That whole time.
That whole time.
The whole 7 years. Interesting.
Never really stopped with that. It just kept going and going until I think this was, in 2019, I was on my second vacation to Japan.
Okay.
And then after that vacation, I took 1 month's vacation.
Yeah, sure.
I realized that, okay, I have to find a way to get here. But then I didn't really know how. So obviously I kept on my path of working. And as COVID happened. But after COVID though, one of my friends, he did find about GLOBIS via an Instagram ad actually. And then
it worked.
The marketing worked because even he was interested. And then he was like, well, you got to find, like, I was still on vacation when he was telling me about this. He's like, when you come back, we have to talk because this is something you would most likely like be interested in.
That's awesome.
So then I believe that course was under Nakamura Sensei from the USA.
Yep.
So once my friend took that trial class, I believe Nakamura Sensei would explain about GLOBIS, how they were founded. They have an MBA program, they have an internship, and they're able to help you get into Japan.
Right.
And then once he told me all that, I was initially hesitant, not because I didn't want to do it, because I was considering, okay, I may have to drop everything here.
Yeah.
Like, in Canada to make that jump.
Right.
So I took a while, actually. I took 6 weeks to decide. But then once I decide, I go 100% though.
Right.
So that's so when I realized, I'm like, okay, this is kind of an opportunity of a lifetime. So it's better I take that chance. Otherwise, you may regret that opportunity. So when you see an opportunity, seize it. So I'm like, okay, let me apply. I took the pre-MBAs. I applied for the full-time. I was fortunate to be accepted. And then, I did through the process of, the visa process, got the visa, then just came to Japan last year, August, end of August.
Awesome. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Got some of this.
So you did the pre-MBA as well while you were in Canada?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you take a trial class first, or was it just your friend that did the trial class?
He took the trial class, but then there was another one that came up, was Essentials of Accounting under, I think, Kato Sensei from the US. So the trial class I found was very interesting because I'm used to the old academic style where the professor teaches for 3 hours.
Yeah, sure.
So I was a bit, like, when we had to participate, I wasn't really used to it because I'm like, we got to participate?
Yeah, they really throw you right into it.
Yeah, and then I'm like, I guess from North America, it may not be so unusual, but then for me personally, it was a bit hard because I was so used to midterm, examination, you just listen, write notes, and then you prepare and you do the exam.
Right.
But this one, you have to do prep assignment, case study, and then apply yourself. So it was a bit like, whoa, what's going on, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
but then over taking the pre-MBA and then now the full-time, I realized that it helps you a lot, actually. You're able to read a case study, find a problem, analyze, make a proposed solution, and then you have to present that in class, and then people kind of not debate, but they're asking you questions. Can you explain your points?
Right.
How did you find this? I don't agree with this. Can you come up with another idea? So it kind of, you're able to kind of think out of your, on top of your feet. And then, over time, you start to get faster and faster in doing that. And then all of a sudden that so-called item that was kind of hard for you, then it became easier.
Right.
So it started from like a difficult point and then eventually became easier and easier. So I do like GLOBIS in that sense where like, I even talked to my other, fellow classmates, and initially the first few modules were difficult because they weren't used to the style.
Right.
So I was very, personally for me, I was very fortunate that I slowly adapted, and even some of my other fellow classmates. And then now we're enjoying the program more than initially, because initially people were new to Japan, new to the MBA, so it's like so much things being thrown at you.
Right.
But then over time, I think everybody adapted well, even me personally too.
Right.
So now I'm enjoying the experience more because now I get GLOBIS.
That's awesome. So you took the pre-MBA, and I think that's a pretty unique offering from GLOBIS. Not many other business schools have programs like that.
Yes.
So for people that are watching or listening that are interested in GLOBIS, could you kind of, since you've gone through it, could you just briefly explain what the pre-MBA is?
Pre-MBA allows you to take up to 8 courses before the full-time. So it reduces the burden initially.
Right.
So I believe module 0, it's 4 or 5 courses, I believe, but then it cuts it down to 0, so you don't take any course in module 0. So for the first 4 weeks, and then the second module 1, you only have maybe 3 or 4 courses. So it kind of allows you to take the burden of that full-time course load, but it also allows you to get used to how GLOBIS course styles run, like how the style of the course runs. When I initially took it, since it was all online, and then you had a lot of students and the professor, it was interesting experience just because I wasn't, even at that time, I wasn't used to it, but I realized it gets you to think, on top of your head. Like let's say you prep and then you answer the questions. But I think the unique proposition is that it helps you transition like more smoothly to the full time. So you're not just thrown in and you're like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
But it gives you kind of a buffer to slowly prepare. Even if like you don't take 8, you just take 3 or 4.
Right.
You have a better like idea of the course load, what to expect.
Right.
And obviously it's 3 months, but then the full time gets condensed to 1.5.
Right.
So it kind of eases the transition. That's what I feel like it does.
It rolls over. I think that's a really nice element of it. And like you said earlier too, moving to Japan obviously is like a huge life-altering decision. And the fact that it's all online, I feel like really helps because like you just said, you figure out what it's going to be like taking the full-time MBA, which would probably help the decision-making process because I can't imagine how it would feel to make such a big leap. And it's almost like you don't fully know what you're getting into. I came to Japan for my undergrad, and that felt like a huge life-altering decision. Of course, it still was, but if you are already an established professional, there's definitely some risk involved with taking the leap. But obviously it's working out for you. So you've been here for a year, right?
About 6 months, 6 months.
Okay, so not even a year yet.
Not even a year.
Yeah. Well, how are you enjoying things? Like, how are you liking it? Class, living in Tokyo, everything.
I do like the experience. Like, I think for me, I was a bit fortunate because I knew the language beforehand. So the jump wasn't as steep for for my other fellow classmates. But obviously now they're enjoying it. But then initially for me when I came in, it was more easier, for example, to register an address. Because most of the time they were still expecting some Japanese ability.
Right.
So like the transition for that was easy. Finding housing was easier. Still some difficulties with that, but still overall easier. For example, if you wanted to go to events or business events, it was more easier because if you're proficient in Japanese, you can speak to the locals easier. So the transition, I would say, for me was good, but also kind of had that. How can I say? I had that good experience, that like kind of wholesome experience, as I would say. So I was able to enjoy. How can I? Let's say the local experience, but also GLOBIS. Like it's kind of two worlds.
Yeah, it was easier perhaps for you to integrate.
Yes.
Or feel integrated. Yeah. I mean, having so much strength in the language, I definitely think is a huge advantage. I've been living here for 8 years and I'm still not proficient in Japanese. So I can relate to probably your fellow classmates. Like that initial jump, when I first moved to Japan, I couldn't even read hiragana, which is like, the most basic phonetic alphabet. So I was completely, in over my head, I would say. But over time, obviously, it gets easier and easier. But that's why I kind of chuckled when you mentioned registering your address or getting a bank account. I think these are the types of things. Japanese bureaucracy and paperwork and stuff is really intimidating and difficult, and especially if you can't speak the language or understand the process.
Even for me, like I do understand it, but like since it's a new system, I was like, because I'm used to the Canadian system, but here when I had to register address, fill in all the paperwork, everything, even I had some trouble. Not because I didn't know the language, but I didn't know the procedure.
Yeah, the system is crazy.
So I had to ask them, can you help me out? I know Japanese, but I want just to make sure I'm filling it out properly, everything good. And then they're like, yeah, okay, everything good, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Something I found in America, or like if you make a mistake on a form, they're like, just scratch it out. But in Japan, it's like you kind of have to restart the whole process. Yeah. But yeah, man, I'm glad you got here safe and you're enjoying things. And the one element of your story that I'm really particularly interested in is that, again, your undergrad is chemical engineering, but then you worked kind of in the tech, I guess, sector of real estate. But your job between undergrad and GLOBIS was a completely separate industry.
Yes.
And then now here you are studying an MBA at GLOBIS in Japan. And one of the biggest parts of our curriculum here at GLOBIS is this concept of Kokorozashi, which is a Japanese phrase that essentially means one's purpose or like mission in life is how we describe it. But it's more focused on your future. And we look at it more focused on your career. So it's kind of the ideal that your job, your career should be something obviously that you're passionate about, and something that inspires you to keep moving forward. And so every student that comes to GLOBIS, or even if you didn't go to GLOBIS, but you work for GLOBIS, we also it's a big part of working here as well, is developing your Kokorozashi. So is that something that drew you to GLOBIS, or do you have a Kokorozashi? Is that something that you're still developing?
I'm still developing it. I wouldn't say it drew me to GLOBIS, but it was like a part of it. So for example, I think Kokorozashi may be equivalent to, I think in North America they call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Where the top part is self-actualization. I think that's maybe an equivalent or close enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think when I thought GLOBIS, I was like, okay, this is like a kind of a golden ticket to Japan. But then when they mentioned the Kokorozashi, I'm like, okay, I can see this is very like relevant to obviously me personally, but also even to the future. Like, like what's my goals, what's my ambitions. So I felt like let's say I didn't have like a very 100% answer to that question. Like, what do I want to do? Because I remember reading the books from Nakamura Sensei, because he provided it via the classes for free.
He's super passionate.
Yes, exactly, 100%. like when I was reading that book, I had a hard time understanding it because I'm coming from maybe the North American mindset where like completely different.
Yeah.
So I was more like, okay, you know, I have to get a decent salary, get decent lifestyle. So I was focusing more on that. And then I did have the Japanese learning, the cultural aspect, but then I think I was still missing that Kokorozashi part. But then I realized over time, okay, maybe I actually have it and I just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
It's just maybe like an underlying thing.
Right.
Because I realized I always liked education sphere, even though I may not have like been focusing on it.
Right.
Because even when I was working, you had to learn, educate yourself. When you're studying Japanese, you have to learn, educate yourself.
Absolutely.
Like let's say you're not doing well in a particular skill set or subject, you would slowly improve. So you kind of, I like that education sphere, but mixed with Japanese culture. So it's kind of an interesting balance, or I wouldn't say balance, but kind of different topics. So I would say maybe not 100%, but I think my Kokorozashi would be related to more education, Japanese language, culture, but maybe also having like a system to spread Japanese cultures throughout the kind of the world. I think there's already a lot of systems in place, but I still think there's some gaps.
Sure.
For example, I know a lot of friends in Canada, Japanese friends, natives, and they have a lot of like family lineage that's not really been exposed to North America because it's all in Japanese.
Right.
And they're having trouble marketing that.
Right.
So I think there's still a big segment of Japan that can be, it can also even help their local economy, for example, but I think maybe in that sphere, my Kokorozashi may be related to that.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. It's a great answer. And I think it's important to note as well that you don't have to have you don't have to know exactly what it is coming into GLOBIS. And a big part of the experience of being a student is figuring it out. And it's something that can change and evolve over time.
Yes.
It sounds like, obviously, you're still kind of figuring it out, and you feel like it's something that's kind of always been there. So I typically ask people on the podcast, like, if it has evolved over time. Do you feel like, at least through your process of kind of like sussing it out, have you noticed that it's kind of evolved at all, or has it always been focused on that element of facilitating culture through education?
It could have evolved, and it's maybe still changing.
Sure, yeah.
In my opinion.
It probably will. I
think for me personally, education is very important just because in the kind of, I wouldn't say climate, but whether you're working, whether it's personal, whether it's academic, education is a kind of fundamental thing that kind of connects everything. So that should be kind of a main pillar, but still a bit of a hard topic for me. But
sure, no, that's totally fine. I mean, you've been here 6 months, so you've got plenty of time, man. It's crazy. But speaking of that, what are your plans for the future? Have you thought that far ahead yet? I mean, you're really in the thick of things right now.
That one I did think about it before I came.
That's okay. Yeah.
Because back in my university days, I was already thinking of moving and living here. I just didn't have the right way of getting in, or right tools, for example.
Yeah.
But once I got accepted into GLOBIS, I kind of made a commitment. Okay, my goal is to stay in Japan, live here, work. I kind of want to stay here forever, personally. So I made that decision before even coming to Japan. So I tried to prep as much as possible. Get all my local affairs in order in Canada and then move over. But then I think it was already, in my opinion, it was already building up throughout the years. Because in university, I was already studying. I was already doing language exchanges. I was even hosting them, actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's kind of over the years, it built up.
Yeah.
Until eventually, even my friends locally they said to me, why haven't you moved?
Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking this, because it was over 10 years, right? Uni plus 7 years after. Yeah. So that's a long time. But that's awesome, because it really shows that, some people do things impulsively, and even like moving countries, something as big as that, if you do it impulsively, maybe several years down the road, you realize maybe this isn't what I thought it would be, or my interests and passions have changed. and it can be really difficult to kind of readjust. But I think that kind of like slow, steady dedication has really paid off for you.
Yes, I think it's just because I came from the main point of interest and kind of like I personally like to challenge myself, even though I may not like to admit it. It's just because if you keep challenging yourself, you kind of slowly get better and better.
Right.
And it's something you want to do, so you're more, more actively, or I should say proactively likely to succeed in that because you want to do it on your own.
Right.
So that's kind of my main focus there.
Awesome. And I mean, speaking of challenging yourself and the over 10 years that led up to you coming to GLOBIS, to wrap things up, we ask every guest on the podcast, knowing everything that you know now, if you could go back and give your past self, that could be like very little Ahmed or like college Ahmed, one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think set a plan, be proactive, be confident in the decisions you make. And obviously if things don't go well, it's okay, it's life, but just kind of making adjustments, but still stay on that path. Because life is gonna throw anything at you, things happen, but as long as you have that kind of personal mission statement, Kokorozashi, then you're more likely to get to that end goal. So I guess for me, I've always liked to challenge education, Japanese culture. So I think that's what kept me going, even though, I had to work full time, I applied through GLOBIS, and that time I was taking two Pre-MBAs, working full time, overtime. So it was like challenge, but then I'm like, I still had that kind of dream in mind, or I wouldn't say dream, but more of like that mission.
Yeah.
So that's what kept me focused, and that's what ended up resulting in me coming to GLOBIS and living in Japan.
That's incredible. Ahmed, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to say or share? Do you feel like we didn't touch on, or?
I think maybe, I guess advice for general language learners is that it's going to be tough initially in the beginning, because I remember that first 1 to 2 years I had a lot of trouble, but then I realized it's because I was interested in it. Eventually, even though I had some difficulties, I improved, and then I started enjoying the process. So I think for a lot of maybe fellow classmates or even future GLOBIS students, just my suggestion is focus on what you want to do, like your passion, and then go like 100% on it.
Awesome. Stay the path.
Yes, exactly. Stay the path.
Perfect. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much for being here, man. It was a pleasure talking to you.
No problem. It's very fun today.
Of course, man. Anytime. We'll have you back on anytime.
Sweet.
All right. Bye, guys. Take care.
Take care.